Turns out there will in fact be a rematch. Rocky struggles with life outside the ring, and Apollo Creed has something to prove. The original film had such a well-rounded and complete story that a sequel was always going to be a challenge. Let's see how they did with Rocky 2. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I feel like a Kentucky Fried Idiot.
Maybe I should say, yo, David.
Yo, Peter.
Welcome everyone, this is a movie podcast. We are working through the Rocky franchise. We did the original last episode today. We're obviously getting into Rocky 2, which, you know, we'll see how things have changed, how the success of the first films maybe affected a couple things. This came out in 1979, and we'll start spoiler-free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get to spoilers. Just before we get started, though, if you do enjoy the show, please do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps us out a bunch if you do. And you can get some bonus shows and some other things over at Patreon if you want to support everything. But I'll tell you more about all that at the end of the show. The first question I have for you, David, because I actually don't know, and I guess you can sort of answer this for the rest of them as well. Like, had you seen the rest of this franchise before, or had you only seen the first one?
I have only seen the first one. I know bits and pieces about the rest of the franchise. I know like villains and like certain fights and stuff like that for a lot of them. But in terms of what the hell they're doing, no idea. Okay, that's interesting. So it's a journey of discovery for you. You can see where everything sort of unfolds. Rocky 2 is kind of interesting in that it's before things get full on. Well, I guess just 80s, because 3 and 4 are these like sort of peak 80s style movies that are a bit sillier. But 2 is kind of in this weird place where it's following up this Oscar-nominated film, right, of Rocky, and it's still trying to take itself very seriously. It's still trying to be a drama, but at the same time, there's a few things that it wants to do because it's a sequel to Rocky, and it wants to play up certain elements. So you can sort of see some transitionary kind of things happening in the movie, and we'll talk about that as we work through it and whatnot. But so obviously the movie follows Rocky basically directly. In fact, you get a recap. Well, it's not even a recap. You just get the last like couple of minutes of the movie. I was gonna say it's not even cut. Like they don't even trim anything out. They may have changed the audio track, but it's the last scene of the movie.
I think they may have added in a few shots. I feel like I saw a few more things that weren't in the end of the last movie. Maybe that's just my mind playing tricks on me.
I'll tell you, they did actually cut one thing out because I wasn't looking forward to it. They cut the eye bit out. They trimmed it down so we didn't have to actually see him getting his eye cut open, which, thank you, movie. Thanks for that.
I felt like there was a few more moments of shots, but I mean, it could just be my mind playing tricks on me. Like, I don't know if it was a case of they shot a couple extra bits to extend it, or if they just, like, oh, this was just some extra deleted footage that they're splicing in for the fun of it. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
But, like, the opening credits play out as the ambulance is or not even taking it, the ambulance is going to the arena to pick up Rocky and Creed because they have to go to the hospital because they beat the shit out of each other. But so the movie picks up right after where it left off. Very Halloween 2 in that sense. This came first, but that's what my mind goes. When I think of a sequel picking up like right from the minute the first movie ends and continues that night, I think of Halloween 2. But that's what this movie does, and obviously there's going to be a fight by the end, but it's how we get there. Why does it happen? Where's Rocky's mind at? Where's Apollo's mind at, for that fact? Which I don't think it's spoiling anything to say that it's going to be Apollo again that he fights, because Apollo's kind of the world champion. It makes sense it's going to be him. But
what are you talking about, Pete? At the very end of the last movie, they said no rematches. They specifically say that.
What was so funny is that they actually go back in that much quicker than I thought there was going to be a little bit, like, from memory, because I'd seen this a long time ago. I was like, oh, Apollo's going to be sitting around stewing, and then he's going to like decide he wants the rematch. They've not even left the building, and he's like, Rocky, anytime, anywhere, and Rocky straight up says, you said no rematch. You just said that like 5 minutes
Apollo
ago.
Comes back with like, I might have a concussion, but I don't remember saying that.
I mean, to be fair, I get it. He says that in the heat of the moment, but even just having a few minutes to like stew it over and like sort of play out what's just happened in his mind has changed. It's not like a fault or anything, but it is quite funny how quickly they don't even build up to him changing his mind on that. Like, he's already there. Anyway, we'll go further and we'll get into all this stuff and spoilers. That's the setup of the movie. Obviously, there's a lot more of Rocky's personal life, a lot more of his relationship with Adrian moving forward, and we'll get into all that as well. But I think first and foremost, we start simply.
Yes.
David, what did you think of Rocky 2?
I enjoyed it, but it's definitely a noticeable step down from the first one. I kept on waiting for this movie to hit on some of that deep interpersonal stuff that the first movie did, of like understanding who he is as a person and how he's struggling with things and blah, blah, blah. And this movie touches on the same topics. It touches on some interesting stuff of, okay, you've got a guy who went from zero, got to the top of the world, and then what happens? Like, he now has fame. He now has an admittedly small bit of fortune. Like, what path does he go down with that? And I like that stuff, but then ultimately it just kind of stops. It just kind of peters out and goes to, oh, okay, well, now we're just worried about the rematch. So I liked it for what it was, but comparing it to the first one, you can definitely feel like, yeah, the first one was a self-contained thing, and this one is just kind of picking up, trying to capture lightning in a bottle once more.
I think it's inevitable with some sequels that they just can't match what made the first film what it was. I mean, this movie doesn't really do anything, I would say, to betray anything the first movie was in any way. It does a lot of natural things with characters. It explores more facets of Rocky in ways that do still make sense. But I think fundamentally, I'd boil it down to one point, is that in the first movie, by the time we're getting to the fight, there's this sense of motivation to prove oneself and proving that he's worth it. And I don't think at any point going into the fight in this movie is there anything that even comes close to that feeling of like, I believe he has to do this. He has to win this. It's almost like in this movie he doesn't really care that much if he wins. and it's not like, it's in kind of a nice way. It's like he's actually kind of mature about it in a weird sense, but it doesn't actually give it that much drive where like, oh, we were really rooting for him to like get the job done. It's like, you know, we were going in a very kind of more lackadaisical mood to the climax of the movie. And I think that kind of sums up Rocky 2 in a nutshell, is that it does a lot of fun things with the character. There's a lot of things from a drama perspective that makes sense. It explores some interesting topics, like what does he do if he can't be a fighter anymore, because that's a whole theme of the movie that it explores. And that stuff's all solid enough. But does it make for an exciting follow-up to Rocky? Not particularly. If anything, it almost feels like they wanted to go back to it's just a raw drama for the first half of the movie. And that worked in Rocky because it started on where he was, but it's a little bit weird to shift back to that after Rocky, especially when you've watched them close together, right? Maybe, you know, because I was thinking during the opening where it's replaying like 3 minutes of the previous movie, to compare it to another horror movie, this is something a few of the Friday the 13th did early on. Like 2 replayed the ending of 1, 3 replayed the ending of 2. I think it stopped for 4, but it was something they did a couple of times. When it was replayed at the start, I'm like, okay, I get it. 1970s, VHS isn't really a thing yet, right? I mean, it's in its infancy, but it's not like necessarily something that everyone has yet. Most people probably haven't seen, unless it's played on TV, which it may have. They haven't seen it since it was in theaters, so it would have probably been quite exciting to see that ending again at the start of the movie and refresh everyone and get them all hyped for the movie they're about to see. In a modern context, when you just watched the first movie a week ago, it feels like, okay, I just saw this. Like,
yeah,
we're like, it's like I was expecting more of a montage, and then it was like, no, we're just going to replay like 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to them replaying the stuff just to get you in the mindset again, just to say, like, here's exactly what was going on there. But because it so very quickly pivots to not betraying, but just like moving down a different path than what was going on there. Again, the rematch line specifically, like, they should have cut that if they were just going to show the entire previous scene, because it's immediately showing like, okay, yeah, it's we're doing different things this time. We're going down a different path. And also it does such a good job of pumping you up, getting you excited. Like, they have the big win moment there and the Adrian and I love you, Rocky, and all that stuff. And then it just, the first thing that happens in this movie is Rocky's like, and now I'm retired and I'll never fight again. It's like, all right.
I think my bigger issue with the I'm retired thing, and again, we could talk about this more when we can flesh out the whole thing, but I feel like there's this sort of like vibe here, and there's an implication, and it kind of comes up as the movie goes on. that Adrian doesn't want him to fight again, and that Rocky promised her that he would stop fighting. But I don't think we ever really got that scene or really got a sense that she wanted him to stop after the fight in the last movie. Like, I know she wasn't in love with him fighting, it made her uncomfortable and whatnot, but it kind of felt like, oh, we're using this as a plot crux so that he can't do it for a while, so that there's something holding him back. It felt like it was using her to be just a plot blockage, thing, as opposed to like everything feeling natural for the characters.
Yeah, I mean, I get it from the viewpoint of how this movie examines it, because it very much examines Rocky wanting to settle down, be a family man, wanting to get... I mean, there's a huge part of this movie where he's looking for a sit-down job. He wants to be, like, just an actual hardworking guy and not a fighter anymore. But then, fighting's in his blood. It's something that he wants to go out and do. And I like the dichotomy there, but you're right, because it's a Rocky movie and because the focus is on the fighting, it makes that family man stuff and all of Adrian's stuff feel like a blockage to getting to the end of the movie. Yeah. It feels like we're just waiting for the point where it's like, okay, and then Adrian gets over it and we move on. Yeah,
and even her getting over it, I don't know, it doesn't feel earned to me when that moment happens. I think it's the weakest part of the... Because it's meant to be the drama of the movie, there's the emotional... And there's parts of the sort of the relationship between them, and both of them being in kind of a rough place at a certain point in the middle of the movie, and we'll get into all that later. But I like some of that. I like some of what it says about either character, but I do think some of the big beats of like how this then propels into the next part of the story feel a little bit unearned, and that's something we'll go into as well. I think what's interesting about this, though, is that clearly because Rocky was a success, not only did Stallone get to write and act in this one, he got to direct this one. He was given the reins to direct. In fact, he directs the next two as well, and then does Balboa in the future. It's funny. See, when you look at his directing career, it's 4 Rocky movies, Rambo 4, and The Expendables. It's such a... And there's like 1 or 2 other little things, but that's the main stuff he's done.
Don't forget Staying Alive, the sequel to Saturday Night Fever, for whatever goddamn reason.
I actually did not know he directed that. Okay, that's a weird bit of trivia. Okay. Fine, I've learned something. But I think what's interesting is that so much of this first half of this movie is about Rocky dealing with this idea that he now has a bit of fame, he now has a bit of money, and I couldn't help but think that Stallone's life was exactly like... I mean, I'm not saying he was reacting like Rocky, but Rocky made him a star, and now he's got carte blanche to direct the next one, and he probably has more money by now. He's probably done a couple other movies before Rocky 2. So I couldn't help but think that Rocky and Stallone's life are oddly mirroring each other right now, and it wouldn't surprise me if Rocky was maybe having his first kid somewhere around this like part of his life.
You mean Stallone?
Oh, sorry, Stallone. Yeah, Stallone.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what age his kids are. I'm sure he has some, but like it feels like there's a lot of parallels going on with the characters.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It feels like one of those. There's an ongoing joke I always hear about of you can tell the fame of a stand-up comedian by how much of their material is based off of airplanes. And it's that sort of thing of you draw off your own experience. You always come up with stuff based off of the things going on in your life. And I think having this, like, it makes sense from a plot perspective of Rocky is now in the forefront. He's able to get like brand deals, stuff like that. It works, but it also is super clear that it, like, Stallone is going through some of this stuff as well, and he's able to draw on that experience, that he's able to just throw around money like that.
I will say, this is going to sound like a weird thing to say, and maybe it's a super vague, undefinable kind of thing, but there was a moment early in this movie when Rocky was talking to someone, and I had a weird little moment where I went, he's not Rocky anymore, this is now Sylvester Stallone. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just because he's a bit younger in Rocky, it's been a few years, and now he looks more like Stallone in the rest of his filmography or something like that, or he's became more confident, and now like his acting style's kind of like cemented into what it would then be for forever. But there's something about his performance, at least early on in this movie, where I almost took some adjusting, where I felt like he's acting more like how I think of Stallone now than he is Rocky. And that's not to say, obviously he still has his dumb moments, he still has his Rocky kind of like you know, writing and mannerisms and things like that, but there was just something in the way he was talking that made me go, he's changed a little bit since the last one, and that's something that's probably never going to change back, because now that's who he is for forever.
Absolutely. Whether it's something in his personality or whether like he took actual acting classes and like got a more Hollywood sort of feel to him instead of that like art housey sort of thing he had going on beforehand. By the way, I did just look up his kids, and his oldest son, who died back in 2012, was actually born just before the first movie came out.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So he was born May 5th, 76. And then their second son was born in 1979, but I don't have whether that was before or after this movie. I don't have a month. So
Well, it'd have been after they made the movie. Like they shot the movie already. But
yeah, that's fair. So they were at least expecting their second child at that point.
Interesting. Just interesting how that lines up.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny because I don't really think about this, but I'm like, oh yeah, Stallone's old enough to be my grandfather because his kids are old enough to be my parents.
Absolutely.
Oh dear. Yeah, I don't know. It's almost like in the first movie he just like fades into Rocky, like he's just Rocky. But in this movie, I see Sylvester Stallone performing, and that's kind of a negative in a way because it's less like engrossing. Like it's a little bit more like I can see the facade, the Hollywood facade in front of me. But I mean, it's a minor thing because like I can't really fault it that much. But there was definitely just a little thing I noticed early on where I'm like, you feel more like Stallone now and less Rocky. For whatever reason. So
no, I definitely get it. Rocky had much more of this timid nature to him. Like as much as he was going out there throwing punches and he had like this fake sort of confident attitude to him, there was always this underlying notion of timidness and awkwardness and like this feeling that he wasn't good enough. And obviously you could have the character change over time as he goes the distance with Apollo, but coming into this, it doesn't feel like, even from the beginning, that there is this transitionary period. He's just immediately this more confident character, this more able to stand up on his own. It's not somebody who's worried because they've gotten all the Oscar nominations.
Yeah, but in a weird way, it takes something from the movie versus the first one, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's almost much like the character, because he doesn't have something to prove, because the makers of the movie don't have something to prove quite in the same way, it's got a little less of that fight in it.
Yeah.
So
honestly, this you could fill this movie up with metaphors for just how Stallone's career is going at this point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, none of this to say though that this is bad. By no means is any of it bad. It's mostly pretty solid. It's just not as special. It doesn't hit quite as hard. It's obviously we'll get into all the details in a bit. You know, most of the main cast are back. I don't know if there's anyone notably new to bring up, I would say.
Not really, nah. I mean, even we got Mickey back, we got Paulie back, Adrian there. I will say that there is a shift, I think, where the last movie, I think Paulie was kind of the, I don't want to say B tier, but he was around there. And then Mickey was just beneath him in terms of importance.
Switched.
They've definitely switched. Mickey is so much more important than Paulie right now.
Yeah. Which is fair. I mean, what's Paulie? Paulie's just hanging around eating snow cones in this movie. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, there was a point I made at the review for the last movie where I was like, yeah, and you know, this whole story going on of like, you know, Paulie wants this job and Stallone doesn't want to give it to him because he thinks he's going to be so much more. And this movie just opens up with him being like, yeah, you could have my job, whatever. Don't worry about it. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I was wrong with that.
He seems to quite like the job as well. He seems quite happy.
Yeah, he does great. Everyone's happy.
Yeah.
Guess that theming just went out the window.
All right. I suppose before we get spoilers, we should mention Bill Conti's back doing the music. And it's a good score. And I actually did completely forget that he wrote a new theme. There's definitely a little bit of the original theme in it, but there is a new theme for Rocky 2, which is not to say that they don't use the original theme as well. Like, it still starts with the fanfare, it still comes up a couple of key moments, but there is a definitive new sort of main theme that plays during the opening titles and plays a couple of key moments and then over the end credits.
Yep.
How'd you feel about that?
It doesn't have the same weight as the original, even as it was playing there. It kind of, I don't want to say it felt like a placeholder song, but it just didn't have that same punch to it. And I think the problem I had is that the main theme from the first movie was still worked in. Like every once in a while there was like a sad moment and they still used the sad main theme from the original. And then, like you said, a few key moments, they bring back the main theme from the original as well. So it kind of just felt like they wanted to use that one the whole time, but they wrote this other song and we're hoping that you'd like it as well.
I mean, I don't know if I agree with that summary of it, because I think it's important for sequels to keep some of the music and keep those themes going, but still have their own new themes as well to make it feel like we're evolving. I think that's just natural for a sequel. I think it's a solid theme. It's not as good or as iconic, of course, as the original fanfare, and like no one's going to argue that, I don't think. But I think as a sort of remix of it, as a kind of a different take on it, it's a fine update. I don't know if this version gets used much for the rest of the series. I honestly don't remember. But
I mean, it's one of the few things I know is isn't Rocky 3 where we finally get Eye of the Tiger?
We do. Although the reason for that is definitely seeded in this movie. Because tigers were not mentioned at all in the first Rocky, but there's actually quite a bit of mentioning of a tiger in this one. So we'll talk about all that fun.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that. I'm like, they keep on mentioning his branding of the Italian stallion over and over again. Meanwhile, he's gone all in on tigers. And I'm like, do you know what a stallion is, Rocky? Do we need to have a talk about like farmyard animals?
You consider a tiger a farmyard animal?
No, but I consider a stallion one. Be like, oh yeah, this is a horse. Yeah. That's another thing in this movie that I got a chuckle out of, because it's not a major deal, but a decent size of this movie's plot is Rocky learns to read, which I didn't expect. I didn't expect to be a full subplot of this movie that Rocky learns to read good and do other things good too is a subplot to this movie.
Yeah. All right, we'll get into spoilers. So spoilers for Rocky 2, you have been warned.
Yes.
Like we said, starts off with the last few minutes of the first film and the ambulance arriving to take them to the hospital. But notably, the press are hounding both Rocky and Apollo Creed as they're being wheelchaired out to the ambulance. And Rocky says he's retired. Rocky's he's kind of subdued, whereas Creed, on the other hand, is like yelling that he wants another fight. He's ready to go anytime, anywhere. He wants
to
prove
duke
himself.
It out in the hospital. He's like, let me out of this chair. I'll take him out now.
Yeah, I mean, his attitude here is that, okay, no one won. Yes, he got a decision, but as far as he's concerned, because they went the distance and there wasn't someone that got knocked out, as far as he's concerned, that's not the end of a fight, and he wants to end it. So he's ready to get out of the wheelchair and start throwing punches right there.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I love Rocky. Like, he still has his eyes swollen and everything like that. He looks like a wreck. And the reporters, as they're hounding him, they're just like, Rocky, what was going through your mind in that last round? And, he's not vindictive. He doesn't care about Apollo at all. He's just like, I should have stayed in school. That's what else was I gonna do.
Which is kind of a nice callback, actually, because that reminded me of Apollo telling kids to stay in school on the news last movie. And Rocky kind of, whether he meant to or not, is kind of just giving that advice on the news here. So I thought that was kind of nice.
That's the other part that we get, even from this early on scene, where he's like ready to go, ready to fight some more, is that they make Apollo much more, I don't want to say villainous, but much more antagonistic. He is much more of like trying to get to Rocky and not just being a dude who wants to throw a cool fight.
Yeah. Now, his attitude is very different in this, and that's one of the things that I think does make the writing a little bit interesting, is the difference in that. The other thing that they bring up fairly early on is that Rocky's eye did get hit pretty bad, and the doctor apparently, we don't see the scene where he gets told this, but we find out from other characters throughout the film that he was recommended that he should never fight again, because if he takes another bad hit to that eye, it could make him go blind, at least in that eye. And as they kept bringing this up, and it was even why Mickey doesn't want to do the fight, and so on, all I could think was, I don't think they mention this once in any movie that comes after this. So the threat of he could go blind with this eye that gets damaged is just something that's just for this movie.
Well, Pete, you know how with older electronics, if you smack it, sometimes it starts working again?
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, so in the last fight of this movie, whatever little nerve was loose in the back of his eye, he just got punched, and oh, hey, wouldn't you know it, 20/20 vision.
Apollo fixed his eye at the end of the movie. Very good.
Perfect.
Good to know. But to be fair, there is a little moment in the hospital, because they're both in the same hospital, And there's several moments with, Rocky talking to Adrian and, I love you this, I love you that, blah, blah. Nurse is like, get out, visiting time's over. And Rocky...
I've never seen a nurse that adamant. She's like, now, leave, go.
Oh, multiple times as well. She does it with Polly, she does it later on when Adrian's the one that's in the hospital. More on that later. But Rocky like gets into the wheelchair and wheels to Apollo's room. And he's like, hey, Apollo, it's me, Rocky. Like, yeah, I think he knows. I think he knows. But he's like, hey, I want to ask you a question. And he's like, yeah, sure, what is it? And he's like, did you give me your all? I don't mind how you phrased it, but that was the sentence.
No,
did you bring it? Yeah. Were you going easy? Now, obviously, in the first round, he was kind of going easy because it was like, oh, it's a spectacle fight. We're just here to put on a show. Obviously, once Rocky started bringing it, Creed definitely started bringing it. But he's like, yeah, no, I brought my... So there is a little thing there that I think is interesting, that it's showing that Rocky did have one just little doubt in his mind. He wanted to know, like, did I actually go the distance, or was he taking it easy on me?
Right.
Did I just kind of, like, put on a show because that's what he was willing to do, kind of thing?
Because I think that is... It is one of those little things that isn't actually resolved by the end of the movie, and you don't think about it because we're in Rocky's shoes, and he's just happy to have made it, but... They do make the point of saying that this was all a show. Like he came in looking like George Washington on a boat. Like it was all just a performance thing.
Which notably, in contrast, when we get to the fight at the end of this movie, he walks out as a serious boxer. He is taking this very differently than the first time.
Yep, absolutely. But at the end of the last movie, we don't ever actually get the clarification from Creed to Rocky saying like, okay, I'm going serious now. Like, there's no point where he says that. So it's good that we got that little bit here where he's just like, no, Rocky, you did it. You actually went the distance.
You don't hear him say it, but I think you get it in the performance. Like, I think there's clearly a turning point after a round or two where it's like, oh shit, he's actually taking this seriously. I have to fight.
Right.
And I think Creed's attitude let's just stick in Creed for a minute, because I think all of his stuff can neatly just kind of, stick together here. Is he... Obviously, he's getting this hate mail that says, oh, that fight was fixed, you carried that bum for no reason. Some people accusing him of being like a villain and wanting to put on a show. Other people saying, oh, you're a loser because you didn't put him down. And he's just reading all this hate mail. I was going to say email. No, it's 1979. It's not email. But
you don't understand how rich Apollo Creed is.
But yeah, we see his big house and his wife walks in with his kids. And no, that's not young Michael B. Jordan's character running through.
Is it not? I mean, I would have accepted it.
I know why you might jump to think that, but his character, not to spoil too much, but his character's an illegitimate son, so it's not the son he has with his wife.
Okay,
so just to point that out for anyone who's not seen the Creed movies yet and is thinking, oh, is that like a little tease for what's to be in 30 years? Well, 40 years even, actually, I'm thinking about it. But anyway, so he's reading this hate mail, and the wife walks in and basically says, just stay off Twitter. Just stay off Twitter, honey. And he's like, I can't. And he throws the letters around. Right? And it's a whole thing. And he's clearly frustrated. And he also, and like we said, he already wanted the rematch. He felt like because this guy was able to go the distance, even though technically he won, he still has to prove that he's the best. And this has diminished his credibility as the world champion. And that's what he wants to do.
Right. Now, that scene, the one you just described, is about half an hour into the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where it should have been. But I think that the little wheelchair scene of him saying he wants a rematch there should not have been there. Because like fair. You're saying,
I agree.
It doesn't feel like there's this build up to it. Having him read these letters and starting to get pissed off because like his image has been tarnished, that makes a lot more sense as to why it would be a rematch.
I agree. I think that when he said that at the very start of the movie in the wheelchair, I was shocked that he was already saying this, because I thought, in my memory, because I remember, because his motivations are still the same. This doesn't change anything I said last time. But I remembered it being more of a like, no, this is clearly getting to him, and then he decides he wants a rematch. Instead, he's already there like seconds after leaving the ring. But yeah, like I agree. If they didn't have that first scene, and I'd probably replace it with another scene that just comes a bit later, like another personal scene where we see that he's getting frustrated. Maybe he gets heckled by a fan or something on the street, something that is pushing him further and further to this.
Yeah, like he goes into an interview or something, and the interviewer's just like, so, do you feel like you need to retire now since that amateur was able to take you on? Yeah,
like something like that. Like, show him getting frustrated. That's what I was saying last time, that he's more of a character in this movie. And it's funny because, like you say, he acts more antagonistic, but you always understand his motivation. He's trying to prove himself. He's trying to act tough. And one of my favorite scenes in this movie, actually, and obviously we'll talk about all of Rocky's side of the plot, but when Rocky does eventually agree to have the fight, and it cuts to this like press conference where they're both sitting down at a table, this scene is so good because Creed is like, oh, I'm going to whip this guy, I'm going to kick his ass, and I'm going to blah, blah, and he's like saying, oh, like, I'm going to prove I'm the champion. He's going round and round too. And then they ask Rocky a question like, oh, it's at this famous stadium in Philadelphia. Are you excited about the fight being there? And Rocky shrugs and goes, yeah, it's only about 10 minutes away from my house. And everyone in the room kind of gives a little chuckle. It's a nice little moment. And then Creed is just staring daggers at him like, are you not taking this seriously? And it's such a fun reversal from the last movie where Creed was not taking it seriously because, oh, it's just an exhibition. It's a gimmicky fight. It's not real. I'm going to win. And Rocky, because he had to prove himself, was really taking it seriously in training. In this movie, Creed wants to prove himself and is taking it super seriously. And Rocky is making everyone laugh, and he's being lovable. Everyone's liking his reactions. The other line he has after that was really funny as well was
Rocky, have you got anything derogatory to say about the champ?
Oh no, it wasn't even that. Yeah, that comes at the end, and he says, "Yeah, he's tough" or something. But no, there was
he's like, yeah, he's cool.
What was there was a line after the one about how close he was to the arena that really made me laugh, where Creed also stared at him.
They were talking about the what he was going to do with the money.
Yes,
like he made a shopping list,
and he starts saying, "Oh, I'm going to pay some rent. I'll buy my wife some nice things. I got a kid on the way. Blah blah blah." Right?
He pulls like an actual list out from his pocket, and he's like, "Yeah, no, I got it all written down here."
Yeah, and Creed it just looks angry. And what's so good about this as well, actually, from Rocky's side of the plot, is how confident and how well he's coming across compared to the advertising stuff earlier on. So there's a great contrast to talk about there, which we'll talk about when we get to that. But this scene is so good because it shows how different they're both tackling it, how Creed is determined to prove something here. And you see it like to the point where even before this, when he's speaking to his people and like his, I think it's still just Apollo's trainer is the credit, but
yeah,
he gets a name soon in a future movie, I swear.
Eventually.
Yeah, but he's like, hey, we have to like try and provoke him into a fight. It's been 6 months. Let's like put out a smear campaign to piss him off so that he'll want the fight. And he's like, you realize you'll be setting yourself up as the villain if we do this. He's like, I don't care, whatever gets him in the ring, I need to have this fight. So it's very interesting just watching that side of the plot play out and like his character, because like you say, I don't think he ever actually crosses the line into being villain. Like, yeah, technically this is a villainous thing he does, but we see his logic of just, this will provoke him into the fight and that's all I care about. This is not about necessarily even hurting him. This is about proving that I'm still the best. This is about proving that like it was a fluke last time kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, is that last movie, so much of Apollo's screen time was dedicated to the image, to promoting it as a big flashy thing. This time, after the fight gets announced, we see his training montage, and he goes hard.
He is taking it seriously.
He is absolutely like, I don't know what that guy's doing over there, but I will not stop until I am tougher than him.
Yeah, it's funny because like you imagine this is probably how he trains for when all of his previous opponents that have been more real world title fights that have like the number 2 contenders coming up and stuff. Like this is probably how he trains for that, but he's probably even more determined than normal. Yeah, because he has something to prove with this one.
My favorite bit is he gets in the ring with some sparring partners. He knocks out one of them, and he's just like, "Give me another one." And it's like, dude, that's like the 4th one you've knocked out. You got to slow down with your partners.
Yeah, the trainer's like, hey, they're going to stop volunteering, champ. You have to stop knocking them out.
Which, I never really thought about is, like, how do you, like, for real world people, how would you be a sparring partner for, like, in his prime Mike Tyson? Like, he would just kill you. I
think you wear, like, a full padded suit, like, head to toe for a start, right? I think you do that. Honestly, though, like, in a real world sense, like I don't get anyone who wants to box. I think it's kind of silly to want to do it in a real world sense. It's fun in a movie, but like I'm just like, how many concussions are these people getting? Like, with some of these hard hits.
It's just you've got the skin, you got the skull, and then you got 3 inches of scar tissue just straight down.
Oh dear. And that's most of Creed's stuff. Obviously, it cuts over. There's actually one of the little moments when it cuts to him is, and this is something that's is in a lot of Stallone movies, seemingly, because I always think of the famous one from, I think is it Assassins, where he crushes the picture of Antonio Banderas. But there's a scene in this of Creed walking into like his bathroom, and on the mirror there's like a little photo of Rocky from the newspaper, and he picks it up and then crushes it in his hand, and I'm like, oh, movie drama, like he's gunning for him.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is like you see how he acts around other people about like, oh, you know, he's so angry about this, but that moment was him in his private life, like nobody else was around. It's showing that he is just actually pissed individually about this. It has nothing to do with like his image or whatever.
But to be fair, I don't think he hates Rocky. I think obviously he's putting on the tough guy act, and he's saying, I'm going to put you down, you're a sucker, blah blah blah. But I think that's all just the anger that comes from the fact that he's mad at himself and that he feels like he needs to prove himself, you know?
I mean, yes, but I think that he is to some level projecting that anger onto Rocky. Like as much as deep down he's got his own stuff going on, I think that he is angry with Rocky because he is angry with himself. Yeah,
but that's what I mean. He's projecting, though. He's just not. It's not like Rocky did something that he can actually be genuinely angry at. It's not like Rocky's he's a bad guy or done anything. In fact, that's probably partly why it's funny that he's so angry when Rocky's making jokes and making the press laugh, is that it's impossible to hate him, but he's like actively trying to hate him. He has to hate him because he's his opponent. He's the enemy.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. I do really like, obviously in the last movie, the trainer went on a whole spiel of basically like, hey, this guy's tough, we should be taking him seriously, and they didn't listen to him. This movie, right before the fight, like he says, we're going to do the rematch, do the smear campaign. The trainer just gets a soliloquy, basically. He walks up to the desk and he's like, do not do this. You have nothing to gain, but everything to lose. Please, for the love of God, don't do this. And Apollo's just like, noted, but we're gonna do this.
Yeah, it's almost like there should have been a scene where Creed apologized to him for, you know what? You told me to take him seriously last time, and I didn't listen to you. That's on me. I apologize. You were right. I was wrong. I'm still going to ignore you this time, but you were right last time.
That's the only reason he gets a name later on, is so that he can specifically curse him out and say, like, you know I don't listen to you.
Actually, because I was saying last time that he's like famous GIF moment from Rocky 4 is like him yelling, throw in the damn towel, and people share that GIF. There's a moment where he was reminding me of that bit of the performance towards the end of this, where he's just yelling, you know, stay away from him, and he's just yelling it, and I'm like, oh, that's the guy I know. That's the one that yells like a very concerned manner.
His eyes are tearing up, like he is so like concerned for Apollo's life here. It's such a good clip.
Yeah. So to go over to then obviously the main stuff here with Rocky, right, and his life coming out of the hospital.
Rocky basically decides, hey, I'm going to speed run my entire adult life as quickly as possible. Let's get this all done in 6 months.
So keep in mind, 1st of January was the fight, because the whole thing was the birthday of America, right? That was the whole thing. Actually, on this, the timeline of the Rocky movies is very, very strange when you actually stop and think about the years. So keep in mind, Rocky 1, that final fight, definitively takes place on the 1st of January 1976. That's what they say in the movie, right?
Was it 76 or 77?
76, because it's 200th birthday of America.
Right. Yeah. Sorry. I wasn't sure if they were like finishing up the bicentennial or if they were just coming into it. But yeah.
I mean, even if it's 77, it doesn't really change. 1 year doesn't change much from what I'm about to say, but 76, I think. Right? This movie picks up right away. Rocky proposes on January. Well, actually, he's probably been in the hospital for like a week or something. But either way, it's still winter, right? It's still snow outside. Right. He takes Adrian out and he proposes. We'll talk about that, right?
Mind you, they just started dating. Like, we saw their first date. It was Thanksgiving. So they have been dating
a couple months
up until the fight, which is like a month and a half, and then however long he was in the hospital. And the moment he gets out, literally, we see him leaving the hospital. He proposes.
Yes. So. And obviously later in the movie, she gets pregnant, has a kid, yada yada, right? In Rocky 5, the kid is like 16 or something like that. But this movie, we know, takes place in 1976 still, because, you know, it starts off right after the first movie, and then the fight, they say, takes place on Thanksgiving. So the movie spans about 11 months.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it was Thanksgiving. Yep, you're right.
There's not big time jumps between 2 and 3 and 3 and 4, right? The movie still saw this kind of follow on as if it's like the next year or something like that. And yet somehow by Rocky 5, the child has become like 15 to 18 years old. I can't remember the exact age, but it's something in that range. So I'm just saying, pay attention to the years and the times of each movie, and just keep that in your head.
All right, I will do so. I mean, they kind of gave an out in here by saying the kid's got Rocky's genes, which God only knows how damaged those are.
Oh God! Actually, can I just on that, just because I'll forget when we get there later. This baby, like, I know Adrian's in a coma for a while, but that head of hair, like.
Yeah.
What the hell? Did they put a wig on a baby? What's happening?
Sometimes they're just hairy babies, man. Especially if you get some thick Italian genes. Like, yeah, you got a hairy baby.
That's wild to me. Anyway, So yeah, it takes Adrian to the zoo. It leaves the hospital and takes her straight to the zoo. And there's a tiger. And I did have a little moment where I went, oh, a tiger, that's funny, because the song in the next movie that's famous is "Eye of the Tiger." And he starts talking about the tiger and whatever, right? But it ends up being that, I like, would you mind, marrying me? That's kind of how he phrases the proposal.
It's the best proposal of all time.
And she's like, yeah, I want to marry you. So they're all happy. It's a nice big moment. It's all fine. However, a few scenes later, right, he buys a jacket, and we'll talk about all this montage, but he buys a jacket with a tiger on the back, and I'm like, they're really, like, now, at this point, I'm thinking, okay, it's not just a coincidence there was a tiger at the start of this movie, and then in the next movie there's a song called "Eye of the Tiger." I'm starting to get the impression that they lean so heavy on the tiger stuff in this movie that the band, Survivor, whether they were asked to or they chose to do it, picked a tiger as like a visual metaphor because of how heavy the tiger's brought up in this movie. And sure enough, it comes up later on. Mickey's yelling at him, "You're a tiger, Rocky." He never says "Eye of the Tiger," but he's like, "Oh, you're a beast. You're a tiger." I'm like, okay, all right. I guess we're just doing all the tiger stuff.
Yep. Once is a thing, twice is coincidence, but 3 times, that was intentional. They wanted the tiger to be the setup for it. And
I feel like the only reason why people remember it is because of the song. So it's just kind of funny that all of that's in here, and then the next movie you get "Eye of the Tiger."
Yep. So one thing with this scene, the zoo scene that I wanted to bring up, we didn't bring it up in the last review because it didn't seem relevant, but the one dick guy who was working for the mob boss specifically called out to Rocky before his first date with Adrian and said take her to the zoo. All those freaks really like the zoo. And Rocky took significant offense to that. And then in this movie, he's like, "Hey, Adrian, let's go to the zoo." I don't know. It seems weird to me, the fact that this thing that he was taking so much offense over of I'm not going to take Adrian there.
I don't think he's offended at the idea of taking her to the zoo. It's a nice enough place to go. It's more the reasons why this man thinks that she should go to the zoo is because she's mentally ill and would enjoy the zoo. That was the guy's attitude. Admittedly, I don't think this scene's supposed to be a callback to that, because of the context of how it was brought up. I mean, I could be wrong, but I certainly don't think Rocky's bringing her here because he's taking the advice.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think he's taking the advice or anything like that, but there was a line, Adrian even specifically asked at one point, "Why are we at the zoo, Rocky?" As if it's almost baiting the question of, bringing it up before. And that's another thing this movie does a lot of, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but a lot of phrases in this movie, especially in the back half, are, "Hey, remember that thing from the first fight? Remember this? Remember that?" And they just do these tiny little callbacks to it. And it's not over the top. It's not an awful amount to where it gets annoying, but some of them are just kind of weird that they're bringing them up. My one that really strikes me is as they're entering into the arena, Rocky's wearing a different robe or whatever. And he specifically just stops and pauses and says, "Remember that big baggy one from last time? That was awful." Okay, yeah, I saw the first movie, Rocky. Why are we bringing this up?
I mean, I think it almost gets away with it because it's how Rocky always talked in the first one, is he would bring up little innocuous things just to say, it's like when they're browsing for a house, right? And this realtor's showing them the house. And he's walking in going, "Oh, I like these bricks. Oh, I like that post box. Oh, these steps, these are good steps. These are good solid steps." He always talks about stuff like that. So him bringing up the robe and saying, "Oh, it's much better than last year's," does feel in character to me for him.
Yeah, it feels in character if it weren't for the fact that there are just so many of those tiny little callbacks.
Sure.
It's the sort of thing where, yes, I understand in his character stuff, this just happened and this is like the biggest event of his life. So I understand him talking about it. But from like a writing perspective of how the audience is going to perceive that, it's just callbacks. It's just time after time, more and more callbacks.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we get this montage now. Rocky's got money. People are coming to him to say, hey, we've got advertising gigs. We want you to be in commercials because you're kind of a local hero now. So he's like, hey, I've got money. I'm buying a car. Yeah, I can drive it. I'm a great driver. Cut to him stalling the car constantly down the road.
Just scattered. I love Adrian even points out, like, do we even need a car? Like, we live in downtown Philly. Like, we can just walk everywhere. Why do we need a car?
Yeah, in fact, we saw that last movie. Rocky just walks everywhere, but it's like a status thing. And I think what I liked about this is that in true to form for people who, again, I say this lovingly, but Rocky, not the brightest person in the world, right?
No.
And I think one of the things that goes along with that is the idea of thinking something really tacky is classy. And he actually says the line, how classy is this? As he's talking about the fur that he's buying Adrian, or he talks about the dog collar, which admittedly, in the context of all the things he buys between the gold watches for Polly and Adrian and the car and the jacket and then his clothes, the dog collar, I have to assume, because it's still from the pet shop that Adrian worked in, it's probably not that expensive, you know, all things considered. But it's this spike-studded collar for the dog. And he's like, look at that, it's so classy. And I'm like, Rocky, no.
Look, I brought up last time that people should not emulate Rocky for his style because nobody's going to be able to pull it off. And I doubled down on that statement this time. If you walk down the street with an embroidered tiger on the back of your jacket, you will be beat up.
Yeah, I just, because he has his signature hat and like jacket in the like the proposal scene, but then right after that is when we get the montage of them buying stuff, and he buys this tiger jacket, and then that's what his jacket is for the rest of the, whenever he's wearing, obviously he's not always wearing a jacket because sometimes he's inside doing a job or whatever, but whenever he's outside walking around, he's wearing that tiger jacket now. He's leveled up. So
I do really like this sequence though, because again, it kind of feels like one of those Stallone parables of, we have this guy never had any money, never had any like ability to buy and spend things. And the moment he comes into this large sum, he just assumes that it's basically limitless. Like, it's such a big number to him that he's like, oh, well, I'm just never going to run out. Like, no big deal. And so he just starts spending it frivolously on cars and jewelry and clothing and all this stuff.
Immediately is like, we don't need a car, we don't need anything. No, Rocky, don't buy this thing. We don't need the house, right? Maybe we should shop around, we may get a better deal somewhere. And Rocky's like, no, I've already decided that's where the radio's going. This is our house.
Well, see, I especially like the house scene because, like, Adrian goes in and she does what you're supposed to do, like mild interest. Don't make it seem like you're that interested in it. Meanwhile, Rocky's going around of like, I mean, I've only seen 2 rooms, but let's get this place. It looks great. Screw the bank. We don't need a loan. I have cash.
Which I guess at least maybe says why when they're hard up for money later that they're still okay because they paid for the house outright. So they're not paying a mortgage. But
even then, during the thing, he says that he's got to pay rent though. So
that's true. I don't know what he's referring to there.
Yeah.
I thought they bought the house, but yeah.
Honestly, I think that it was probably that they did go through with the loan. And they like actually, because Rocky probably just has no idea how much money he actually has.
Oh, sure.
And he's just like, oh yeah, I could buy this house. It's like, Rocky, this is twice as much as you made from the fight.
And we should also mention they are married at this point. There was a quick marriage scene with like almost no one at the church.
Seriously, I think it goes like proposal, maybe one interstitial scene, and then church. And it's like, oh, like I said, speed running his adult life. We're just zooming through this.
Yep. Well, you know, he's an old man at 31 now, so he has to get things done.
He could die any minute.
Yeah, you know, I pity anyone who's over the age of 31 and has not got their life set up because.
Look, I'm 30, and I look at those people older than 31, especially people in the range of like 35. Those people are dead, just dead.
I don't know if one number's a range, David.
Like 36 and over, I can respect that. 34 and under, they're alive. But 35, just dead man walking.
Yes. So we get all this, him spending his money frivolously, thinking he's got these advertising money coming. He made some money from the fight, obviously. But then, of course, we get him actually trying to do the advertising job. And they put him in like a caveman outfit. He's got a club. And he's like, do I look stupid, Adrian?
She's like, yeah.
Yeah, and she's trying to be nice about it. But they put him in this like cage set, and there's a couple of pretty models holding up this bottle of aftershave or whatever it is. And they're like, okay, we've got cue cards, read the cue cards. But as established in the first movie, Rocky's not so good at writing and reading, right? He's not too hot at that, and he gets some words wrong. And the director is a complete and utter dick. Now, don't get me wrong. I get the frustration that something that should be like, 4 or 5 takes until you get a couple of good ones, move on to the next scene.
Yep.
Apparently, they've been there for 4 hours, and Rocky just keeps. Not only is he blundering the words, he's saying it all with this like just dead lack of charisma because he's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
He's like, when I put on cologne, the women go crazy. Look at it, it's just, he's deer in the headlights, doesn't know what he's doing.
Just like, hey, I'm Rocky Balboa, and I want to tell you about some aftershave that smells really good.
They're getting frustrated to the point where Rocky eventually calls out the director and says he's being, he's not being very polite, he's being mean.
Yeah,
and
he's like, look, I'm trying my hardest up here, I'm doing my best, and you're just being rude. You're just being rude.
But, it falls immediately, and he gets, obviously hurt when the director refers to the cue cards as dummy cards or something to that effect. And eventually the director's like, you know what? I never wanted you for this anyway. Agent man, get him out of here. I don't want him. We're moving on. Like, this is all over.
But I think it's made clear the agent also just walks out. Like, he's done representing Rocky. He sees that this isn't going to work. Yeah.
He can't do this, and that sort of begins the next like half hour of this movie is all the things Rocky cannot do. And obviously, he's like, you know what, I'm going to fix this thing that's obviously embarrassing for him. He wants to learn to read, and we see him practicing in bed with Adrian. He's reading the book and doing his bestest.
And Adrian's like, she doesn't mind, she doesn't care. She's very understanding, and she's pushing him along, saying like, yeah, no, you're doing great. I love hearing you read. It's fantastic.
So. But he wants a sit-down job. He wants an office job, right? And we see him go to like an employment agency, a couple of employment agencies actually. But the first one he goes to is clearly a lot fancier. It's a nice big office with a nice big brown desk, and he's got the leather chair and all that. And the guy's nice enough. Like, the guy's not a dick to him in any way. He's just like, you didn't finish high school, you didn't go to any kind of college, and
he has the fantastic question of any criminal record, and Rocky just like shrugs, just like nothing to brag about,
which obviously gives him a glance for that because like, okay, that's a yes.
Yeah,
but he's like seriously though, these types of jobs are very competitive. You can't just waltz into one when you've got no history leading to it, but. And the guy like gives some genuine advice. He doesn't belittle him or anything. He's like, but you were in a big boxing match. I know who you are. You're good at it. Why aren't you doing that? You could be making way more than anyone here does. Like, why aren't you doing that? And Rocky just gets kind of sad because he's made this choice not to do it. He's apparently promised Adrian that he's not going to do it. So he leaves, and he wants an office job, and he keeps asking for office jobs. And they're basically saying to him, look, Rocky, you don't have these qualifications. You have to be realistic. You can do some physical labor. That's kind of about it for a regular job. But he also doesn't want to go back to working for the loan shark dude either.
Right.
Like, he doesn't want to do that. And he offers him a job back, but he doesn't want it.
Yeah, there's an interstitial scene. It's almost blink and you miss it, but it sets up the pregnancy somewhere in here. And this is before...
On.
Yes.
My favorite line in this whole movie.
Okay.
We cut to Rocky waiting by a door, and that door says gynecologist, right? Mm-hmm. Adrian comes out of this door. Rocky's bouncing his ball as he does for a couple of minutes. Adrian comes out of the room and she says, yes. And Rocky responds with, yo, Adrian, you did it. I've never heard someone refer to a pregnant woman as, yo, you did it. You did it. You got pregnant. Rocky, you had a part in this.
I mean, did he?
Oh, which actually reminds me.
Yes,
earlier
I know
on,
exactly the line.
The
loan shark. The loan shark comes up to Rocky at like right after he gets out of the hospital, or even when he's in there.
He's got money to invest. You see, because he's got some money from the fight.
He's got all this money going on, and he's just like, well, hey, you got all this money here. Instead of just spending it or whatever, how about you do some investing? Have you ever considered investing in condominiums? And Rocky just looks wide-eyed at him, and he's like, condominiums? I never use them. And the scene just cuts there. It just stops. And I'm like, well, that sets up how the pregnancy happened at the very least.
I mean, to be fair, they seem quite happy. They seem to want a kid.
Yeah.
You know, admittedly, I feel like wanting your child, I mean, it's like, what, 4 months since they started dating and like 2 months since they got married. It feels a bit quick, but as you said, he's fast forwarding through the adult life, whatever.
Yep.
I would want to have a couple of years of just having fun sex, maybe. You know, I'm a simple man. Okay, I'm a simple man.
But the reason I bring up that scene at all of the finding out the pregnancy is because it does happen just before he does the advertising stuff, and therefore
Is that just
before
before
any like the desk jobs.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, right.
And so it really does set up this idea that the reason that, like, obviously Adrian doesn't want him to fight, but the reason why is because the baby on the way. Like, he has to be alive and able to care for this baby, and that's why he's not accepting like the job with the mob boss anymore. He's not looking for these sort of physical jobs. He wants something that's going to be able to provide better for his kid.
And again, the mob boss, he isn't a prick about it. He offers him the job. Rocky says no, he can't do it anymore. And he shakes his hand. He says he's happy to see him. You know, it's never like oh, you turn me down, I'm going to have you whacked. It's never that.
I'm waiting for that, like in like Rocky 5 or something, where all of a sudden it's like, you crossed the mob one too many times, Balboa.
I mean, I was surprised Joe Spinell was back in this one, so I'll be surprised if he's back in the next one. I feel like I didn't expect his character to show up again, so there's better continuity that he's here, but you know.
Yeah, unless it relates to Paulie and like him doing his job, I don't really see how this character can do anything else. He's just kind of out of Rocky's life at this point.
Yeah, so Paulie gets Rocky a job at where he used to work at the butchers at the warehouse and stuff, dealing with all the beef and whatnot. Maybe it's other. I think it was just cows I saw, but maybe it's a variety. I don't know.
Yeah, there's probably pigs or stuff just around.
But yeah, he's helping move the carcasses around. He's sweeping things up. He's washing trays down. Whatever else. He's waiting for the box of parts to pile up, and then he takes it somewhere. But he's told this is not like a permanent position. It's a week-to-week job. You could be let go at any time. And he's like, yeah, I need the job. You know, give it to me. So we get some montages of him doing this. 2 montages, actually, and importantly, in between the 2 montages, like after his first day of work, he goes home to his house. Adrian's there. And Adrian's like, you look tired. Like, he actually almost looks more tired after a day of this work than he ever did after, like, training or even the boxing match itself. Because at least then he looked alive. Like, yeah, he was like, exhausted physically, but he was alive. Whereas here he looks beat down and, like, this is worse. Like, doing this for a day felt worse than anything else. And it's clearly, like, tearing his soul apart that this is what he's doing. And it's the whole thing. Because then he obviously he's back at work. And he's let go. The guy goes up. The guy says, "Hey, come over here. I'm sorry, we have to let you go. We need to make cutbacks, and because you're the newest guy, everyone else has got seniority. You get let go first. I'm sorry, it's the way it is." And Rocky, the poor soul, just says, "Well, can I finish out the day and get paid for the day?" And he's like, "Yeah, on you go. Well, sure." Like, so, yeah. And Adrian comes back, and I think it's after this where Adrian comes back to the house, and Rocky's in the basement punching the punching bag. Right.
There is one interstitial scene right before them where he has to sell his car to Paulie.
Oh, yeah. Well,
and Paulie's basically like, do you need money, man? Like, I can give you money. I have some cash on hand.
Which, by the way, Paulie's in a suit. He looks like a mobster now. He's set up. But yeah,
that advertising gig at the end of the last one really worked out well for him. Yeah,
Rocky really had to, like, basically force him into buying the car. And then he's like, no, I don't need a lift home. I'll walk. But yeah, he's punching the punching bag. Adrian comes down and he says, I got let go today. I was thinking of maybe fighting again. And this is where it really ramps up that you promised, you said you wouldn't do this. And that's kind of where we go from there. And I think, one of my, like, I like some of what comes from this, right? Because we get to this point where there's several scenes showing Rocky being belittled by those around him for not fighting Creed again, right? Whether it's because Creed puts this cartoon in the paper calling Rocky a chicken, and Rocky clearly, he says, oh, it's funny, it doesn't bother me, but then he takes it into the bathroom and throws it on the ground. It clearly is getting to him. There's the guys at the boxing, because he gets a job working for Mickey, because he tries to ask Mickey, maybe we should do the fight, and Mickey says, no, like, your time's done. On the filming of this scene, I really like this, actually. He asked Mickey, hey, I was thinking maybe I would fight Apollo, and Mickey's like, no, you can't. your eyes done, like you've got the heart, kid, but you don't have the parts anymore. Like you're broken down, you can't do it. And to prove his point, Mickey says, all right, look at my nose. And he brings in his finger from the one side, and then Rocky says when he can see it in his periphery, right, when he's staring right at his nose. But then he does it from the other side. And I really like the subtle touch in the cinematography here, that when you get the other finger, the camera angle doesn't let us see the finger either coming in. And I thought, oh, that's actually really smart. That's just a subtle little thing that puts us in the same shoes as Rocky for this moment.
Yep. And as you're waiting for it as well, because it's further off screen, you're like, how close is it going to have to get before he says it? And you then realize, like, oh, it's not going to be until it's on screen. So... Yeah, no, bro. And it really drives home, like, Rocky really can't see anything out of his right side. Like, he is absolutely a blind spot for him.
Mickey then slaps him on that side and says, look, a 70-year-old just slapped you and got away with it. Like, the champ is going to massacre you. You can't do it. But when Rocky asks for a job, Mickey says, oh, you can't work here. Like, I would give you the job, but, like, is it not going to be demeaning, like, carrying the buckets and the towels and stuff for all these younger guys when you're supposed to be, like, this big contender?
Yeah, like, all the guys there see you as a legend. You're the one who went the distance and made it against the heavyweight guy. And you're going to be carrying their towels, man. And that's not, like, what you want.
Yeah, and sure enough, a couple of them start acting like assholes and making jokes about it. And they even make jokes in the street when he's walking Adrian home. And it's all this stuff that's belittling them.
You're right, but it is also, I think, mostly from the... cartoon that's get published as well, because Creed runs a smear campaign, and it only feels like people are really laying into him once they start seeing that and they see, like, oh, okay, you're a chicken, you're not actually a champ, you're a joke who doesn't want to go back and finish what he started.
So it all comes to a head when Creed is on TV giving an interview and talking about Rocky, again belittling him, intentionally trying to draw him out. And Rocky's watching it. It cuts around. We even see Mickey seeing it as well. Mickey's watching because Mickey's eating like crackers and soup, and he starts throwing the soup and crackers around because he's getting mad at Apollo Creed daring to say these mean things about Rocky, to the point where Mickey shows up at Rocky's house. He opens the door. He's there, and he's like, "Let's do it, champ. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's kill him." Right? And this is actually my other favorite moment in the movie for cinematography. Is Rocky turns and looks at Adrian on the stairs. And the framing of this shot and the lighting of this shot, where she's standing on the staircase and there's just empty walls on either side, and it's like she's in a box, and it looks lonely. It looks like he's leaving her here. It looks like he's abandoning her by saying, "I'm going to go do this fight, even though you still say you don't want me to. You've not approved of it." In fact, there's even like a little bit before Mickey comes in, where Rocky's like begging her, "Hey, like, I've never asked you to stop being a woman. Please don't ask me to stop being a man." Which, I mean, that line feels a little bit like a dated mentality, but like, you get where he's coming from. He's like, I have to do this. Like, this is killing me that I'm not proving myself here. Yeah. Which, you know, it's fine. But what I did like about where this all leads, though, is that as the training starts and we see all this playing out, is that it's kind of clear that Rocky's heart isn't really in it, right? He's not doing a good job. He's chasing the chicken. It's not going well. He's not putting...
Right, well, I think you need to explain the chasing the chicken a little bit.
We'll get to chasing the chicken.
All right,
but like all the different things he's doing, it's like, he's not hitting the bag as enthusiastically or as quickly. You know, the little one that you're meant to keep going. You know, with the
speed bag.
The speed bag. That's what you call the thing. Like, he's not doing it very well, and it, intercuts with Apollo, and he's like, like a Terminator. He's just like focused. He's annihilating these bags. There's nothing left. There's feathers and leather on the floor after he's done. Right? So all this is playing out, and I did like the idea that his heart can't be in it because Adrian has not given her blessing, because it's going against his wife. He can't fully get into it and commit himself to it in the same way that he did in the first movie. I do like that element of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is what it was trying to get across there. I also recognize the idea of, it's kind of that the whole reason that he would be doing it at all is to give his family a better life. Like, he tried all these other routes. He tried doing things at like an office job, even the menial labor. He tried doing all that. It's not working out. And he knows he's good at fighting. He knows that he could do something here, but he also knows the risk to it. And he knows that, like, there is a chance that, like, he's going to not be able to fully care for his wife and kid after this fight. And this idea that his wife disapproves of it and is not giving her blessing is just the extra nail in the coffin of him being like, you know, if I'm going to have to go in there, then I'm just going to go down quick before it even like matters. And he's not outright saying that. I don't think he's even admitting it to himself, but he's not putting in the effort to even put up any sort of fight.
Yeah, he's clearly not trying or giving it his best. And you know, the idea here by the end of this section of the movie is that she is stressed as well because her relationship's strained. You know, it's the idea that both of them are worse off because they're not together. They're not like, and they're still living together, but what I mean is they're not, you know, emotionally together right now. They're both the split. She's stressed while pregnant, and that leads to her, you know, having an early, you know, I'm just summing all this up. Right? She has this early delivery, which leads to a coma, and the doctor even says it came on because of stress. Right? She was stressed about something that led to this early delivery, and it's put her in a coma. And Rocky obviously then has to feel guilty and be in the hospital and all the rest of it. Like, thematically, this entire idea that neither one of them, right, whether it's her being pregnant or him fighting, that both of them are doing less at that than they should be, and or whether it's because of physical reasons, emotional reasons, whatever, because they make each other better. And when they're missing in some way from each other's lives, it's making them both worse off for it. Like, thematically, I'm okay with that. I think the problem is that once we get to when she eventually wakes up and she almost immediately just says, "Hey, Rocky, when?" Yeah. I'm like, I don't know if the movie justified why she has come to... I think there's a way to get there. I think there's a way for her to sort of see what's happened to him and understand what he's going through and realize that he needs to do this for whatever reason. But the movie doesn't really give us that, I don't think. I think she just wakes up and she's like, you know what? I just survived a coma. You know what? Yeah, life's short, Rocky. Go punch him.
I mean, I disagree. I think that they could get there better. I think that it is a bit weird that like, practically her first words coming out of a coma is just, yeah, okay, go ahead. But I think that there was the transitionary point of, obviously the baby was born in the interstitial there. And I mean, I want to get to this as a whole different point, but like Rocky hasn't even seen the kid over the course of what feels like weeks. Yeah,
he doesn't want to see the kid without her seeing him as well.
And like, if that were like an extended point that they like harped on, I could understand it as like a character beat, but instead it's a throwaway line. It doesn't come why up, he's surprised seeing the baby.
It doesn't come up until the scene where she's saying the baby, right? It's like right before the baby's brought in where he says that. We don't know that in advance.
Either way, ignoring that stuff, I think that her having the baby, her holding in his hands, and also the fact that she woke up with Rocky right there by her side, literally holding her hand in the moment, I think that it sets forward this idea of things are going to be okay. Like, he was there, like he was already there, and he's going to continue to be there no matter what. The baby was born, it's healthy, it's fine, and it just instates this idea of like, we're going to be able to make it no matter what here. We made it through like me being in a coma. It's going to be all right. Go ahead and do the fight. Like, if this is like, it means that much to you, you should go ahead and follow your dreams. Yeah. So I think it was instantiated a little bit, and I think it was given some credit there, but obviously it could have been done a lot better, even if it's just as simple as like letting her go home first before she says it.
It would be more fulfilling to me if it felt like she came to kind of this conclusion in a way that I felt like, okay, she has agency, and now she like believes in him and wants to root for him and wants him to go do the fight. But I just never really felt like it got to that point. One thing that I did like in this section of the movie though, is that after she goes, she goes to the hospital, Rocky and Polly are at the hospital, and the doctor explains there were some complications and his heart sinks, and she tells him what's happening. Right, Mickey shows up at the hospital right that night. And Rocky, at this point, visiting hours are over, and as we've already mentioned, the nurse is like a militant, like, you have to get out of here, the visiting hours are done. Yeah. Rocky goes to the church chapel, right? Which is a thing in some hospitals in America, apparently. Right?
I'd say most, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that's a thing here. I could be wrong, but I certainly have never heard of a chapel in a church. But he's praying, right? Whatever. Mickey comes in, and Mickey like starts off talking about why the training's not going well, and I'm like, Mickey, his wife is in a coma. This is not the time. Now, but to be fair, I ended up kind of loving this scene though, because Mickey, it feels like he wants to explain why he's been upset at Rocky, but the actual end of the scene is in his own way saying, okay, Rocky, obviously your heart's not in this fight right now. You're here at the hospital with your wife, and that means I'm here with you too. And it kind of felt like by the end of the scene, Mickey was accepting that this is more important than the fight. And I kind of liked that moment. I thought that was a good little moment. Yeah,
no, he opens up that monologue by basically just saying, like, look, I'm going to say this once and then I'm never going to bring it up again. Like, I just need to get this off my chest. And he, like you said, he goes through the whole spiel of it, but it basically ends with this idea of him saying, like, you have to want this. It's not going to matter at the end of it if you don't want it. So obviously right now you're focused more on your wife, making sure she's fine. Totally get that. But like once we're done with that, once things get back to that, you have to still want it. And I'm not going to push you anymore. I'm not going to tell you like what you need to do or anything like that.
And he was already complaining that Rocky was wasting his time by not training properly before any of this happened. So now obviously they're losing time, maybe weeks, however. I mean, it's all kind of vague as to how long it actually is. She's in the coma.
There is absolutely nothing that differentiates from the beginning of the movie of it being like snowy to the end of the movie where it's Thanksgiving. There's no sense of how long it is, except for the fact that they got married and had a baby. So it must have been at least 9 months.
Yeah. There's no summer in Philadelphia. It's not always sunny in Philadelphia, as it turns out.
In fact, it's pretty overcast, and it deserves a leather jacket most of the time. So one thing I wanted to bring up, and it was way, way, way back, which is where I was doing it. It was downstairs in that basement scene. When he's punching the bag, is that's a point where Adrian brings up the idea of like, well, hey, we'll manage, we'll do whatever. I can go get a job myself. And you see Rocky fighting against this, mainly because A, she's pregnant already at this point, but B, like, he already had this idea built out that he was going to be able to provide for her and his family. Like, that's what he was raised on, obviously. That's the kind of thing that he wants to be as a father and a husband.
It's part of the pummeling he takes throughout the middle of this movie. You know, not a boxing pummeling, but a pummeling of life of like, no, you don't have all this sorted out. You don't have all this income coming in. You can't get a job that you want. You know, there's all this...
That's what I really like about it, is because she's like, yeah, I'll get a job back at the pet shop. It won't be a big deal. No problem. And he's like, well, what about like diseases in a pet shop? She's like, there's no diseases in a pet shop. Don't worry about it. We're fine.
Rocky, you met me there. I was working there for years. It was fine.
Yeah. But she goes back upstairs, and that's the point where like before he was just like tapping the bag. He was just like throwing some light punches. You see him throwing some real heavy ones at that point.
Yeah.
And obviously he's very upset. And that's immediately after this scene is where he goes to Mickey and basically says like, let me fight. My wife just said she's going back to work. I'm not cool with that as a man. Please.
He feels like a failure. He feels like he's failed, and that's driving him. I think the thing with me though, this like going back to like so at the end of the coma, and Adrian says win. And then it cuts to the training montage. The Rocky 2 theme starts playing, and he's taking it seriously now. He's doing the push-ups, but yada, 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 right? Not to be confused with the running sequence, because the running sequence is actually after the training montage. The training montage is its own separate thing, and then there's the... now we're going to do the sequel to the running sequence. Two separate things.
It's hey, let's do the running sequence, but instead, people now know who Rocky is.
Yes, so we get the insane, and to be fair, it looks good with like, all the kids like running with him behind him. So there's just this big crowd running with him.
It looks good right up until you notice the point that some of these kids were like, "I'm going to make sure my face is seen on camera for as long as humanly possible."
Yeah. Also, I did. It's not a big deal, but I did notice there was like 4 different shots where somehow there was an American flag like dangling like in the upper part of the frame.
Well, he runs down this street, and I don't know where this is, but he runs down this street that has like all of the country's flags.
Yeah, well, that's fine, because that's clearly like a staple of that street, and it's like, you know, you've got all the nations, right? But there's like 3 different places before that where there's like at least 1, if not 2 American flags dangling. And maybe there's just that many American flags kicking about because America is obsessed with its flag. But regardless, it really stuck out as being patriotic or some shit. Anyway. Here's what I was actually wanting to get to though, right? So you got the training montage, you got all that. this goes back to the very first thing I said. My main critique of the movie is that despite, okay, his wife's given his approval, and I like that in the sense that, okay, now he can have his heart in it because now Adrian approves, and because if Adrian wasn't on board, it just wasn't quite right. It wasn't quite the same, and I do like that element of it. But I never felt, like, even at this point in the movie, like the driving force is remotely like the first movie in terms of like level, because it just kind of feels like, okay, he's willing to do the fight, he's willing to, you know, be successful financially and whatnot, but I never felt like going into this that he even felt like he even cared if he won, right? That was kind of the vibe going into that fight. And I think, well, I get it from like a maturity element. It is actually very mature for him to be like, you know what, it doesn't matter if I win or not. The point is just to have the fight, put on a good showing, to feel like I've done my best, earn some money, take care of my family, and whatever. But as a movie, it's not that much of a driving force for me to root for Rocky and be like, he needs to win. And I almost like wanted in the fight itself for Apollo to piss him off at some point, to feel like he really did have something to prove at a certain point. But I never really felt it. So the weird thing is that despite the fact that this is the one where Rocky wins at the end, I actually felt like...
Spoiler.
We're in spoilers.
I know.
Right? I felt like he didn't earn it as much in this one as he did in the last one.
Well, I think you really hit it on the head when you were saying his motivations, though, is that in the first movie, him, whether he wins or loses, it doesn't matter. He just wants to go the distance. He wants to prove that he has the ability to make something of himself.
But that's the point, though, is that it matters if he goes the distance. Like, he cares if he goes the distance. And it felt like he deserved it. Like, he earned it. He cared about it. And we rooted for him to go the distance. In this one, he happens to win at the end, but it doesn't feel like we're...
Well, that's what I was getting to, is that what he already proved himself in the first movie. He proved he could do it, and he's willing to retire after that. Like, he is at the point of, in terms of like social needs, at the highest point. He has achieved his life's goal of going the distance with the champ. He doesn't need anything more from that. So the fight only exists on Apollo's side. And then the only thing by the end of this that we get the reason that he's doing the fight is specifically for the money. It's specifically so that he can care for his family. And that isn't a good driving motivation at all, to say, like, caring for the family, yes, but like, we've already shown he can make money other ways. As difficult as it may be for him, he was seemingly being able to bring in a decent amount of money working at Mickey's gym. Like, he didn't need to do this fight.
Yeah, the motivation is kind of lacking. It's almost like just by definition of what the first movie was, there was no way to have the fight have as much dramatic weight the second time round, unless he for some reason felt like he needed to win to still prove himself. And I appreciate that they didn't do that, because that would have been a betrayal of what Rocky wanted in the first movie. It'd be a betrayal to say that he now has to win to prove it to himself. No, like, it was going the distance, he did that, and that's fine. But that inherently means that him winning the second one, there was always going to be like, damned if they do, damned if they don't, in terms of how they come up, you know, approach it with the character. And I think, you know, maybe this was the better of the options, but it does feel a little bit lackluster in terms of like actually really caring about him succeeding. And when he does succeed, it's like, okay, like, I like that Creed was, you know, he was being a bit of a dick, he was, you know, trash talking and whatnot, but it never got to the point where I'm like, oh no, he has to take Creed down. Creed's like a villain who needs to be stopped.
Well, that's what I think they might have wanted to do here in order to make the stakes higher, is not a villain in terms of like he goes out and does something unforgivable, but he just takes the trashing too far at some point. He actually gets under Rocky's skin and says something that, like, maybe it doesn't justify him doing the fight entirely, but it gives that drive to win a lot more. It gives that drive to be able to go that whole distance, instead of it just being, oh, I have to win because my wife told me to.
It almost feels like the biggest problem with the movie is that it has to build up to a boxing match, when all the things that it could do that would make more sense dramatically is not to build up to that. But you've got Creed pushing for it the entire time. It's almost as if it would have been better for the second movie to be called Creed and just make it be Creed's story about wanting the rematch and all focus on it from his perspective. It might have actually made more sense to flesh out that stuff more and make it more about him trying to prove something. You know, whatever.
I mean, also, even going back to the first movie, this is one of those other things where it feels like it does a slight pivot, but that slight pivot changes everything. In that the first movie, Rocky was already a bit washed up. He was already like on the end of his career pretty much. And it was only this fight that like was that final last push just to show that he could do it. To then pull him back in and say, no, but I'm going to keep fighting, kind of undermines that message of like, you worked your whole life to get to this point. Now you have to keep doing it forever. Like, it's not something that you can ever just relax on, because pro athletes apparently just can't relax forever in their life. They have to keep going till they're dead. I
kind of get the argument, though. They're also saying that, no, this is who he is, and they can't just like decide to turn it off just because like life is saying you've hit 30, so you have to just like give it up now. He's like, no, I'm a boxer. This is what I'm good at. This is what I've always been good at.
And like, I get that, but I don't think the first movie really drove that home that much, where it was, oh, boxing's the only thing I can do. I think he had the career with the mob boss guy the whole time. I think that obviously wasn't a good fit for him of what he wanted to do, but it never said that boxing was his only career choice ever.
Well, no, but this is a different movie. This is this movie's theme, right? You can't always say that the original movie had to have seeded something to do. Like, nothing here betrays what the first movie did in that context, so I think it's fine.
No,
it's not.
It doesn't betray it, but it changes the character of Rocky. It changes it from someone who is a good, solid boxer who enjoys it and it's like a good hobby of his, to now it is his defining characteristic. Rocky is a boxer, and he cannot be pretty much anything else outside of that.
True. They did keep the whole idea, though, he's not about inflicting pain or punishment. He's not about the violence. And even, again, that just comes down to Creed trash talking and saying, you're going down. Even as the bell's ringing, you're going down, chump. And he's like, let's have a good fight, Apollo, eh?
There was one point, I can't even remember what Apollo was doing, but Rocky just leans over to Mickey. He's just like, I think he's still mad.
That was fun. Like, you could almost turn this last fight into a comedy of Rocky just pissing him off because he's not coming at him with the ferocity that Creed wants. He wants a blood fight, and Rocky's like, oh, here, we're here to put on a show, Creed.
I really hope it's a recurring thing for as long as we have Mickey, of every single time we go to the fight, it's just them riffing for like 5 minutes before the fight, because they did that in the last movie, they did that in this movie, and I just hope it keeps coming, because it's some of the funniest lines are said during this sequence. Like my one that I was actually thinking of using for the opening quote, but I couldn't figure out how to work it in, was Rocky sees Apollo entering the thing, and he's just like, oh, hey, it's Apollo, and Mickey's like, who are you expecting? And he's like, I was kind of hoping he wouldn't show.
Yeah, that was a funny line. That was a genuinely funny line. I did like some of the, to talk about the actual fight, like, I did like this idea of Mickey saying, okay, you fought Southpaw last time, which I believe is leading with your left hand.
Yes.
But, I mean, don't I don't care if I'm wrong. Whatever. But the point is, he's like, hey, we're going to train you to lead with your right hand so that he's not expecting that. And we get like part of the training is like tying his other arm up so he has to like punch a certain way, and it's all about retraining him. And then Mickey's like, don't switch back to Southpaw until I tell you. It's almost the idea that Creed will not be expecting this new fighting style from the get-go. He's going to spend potentially 14 rounds getting used to like tackling that, and then at the last possible minute, switch back to your strong style, and then, reap the reward of that.
Yeah, it's the idea of like, okay, obviously Apollo has trained his entire life to fight against normal boxers, not southpaws. So if you fight in that style, he's gonna like punish you. But then the moment you wear him down even a little bit and then switch over, he's not going to be able to do anything about that. Like, he's immediately going to just drop.
And admittedly, though, that is part of why this fight does feel a lot more Hollywoodized versus the first movie. I mean, not just because we've got a lot of fancy slow motion moments in this one, which is, again, very different from the last. And although I did laugh because they do these like ultra slow motion moments where, and it looks good. To be fair, it looks good. Rocky gets punched and you see like all the sweat and water like coming off of his hair and the impact. Those are fun visuals. I did laugh though, because a couple of times it cuts to like one of the, either Mickey or the other like trainer, and they clearly didn't shoot those shots in the higher frame rate because they look really, really stuttery. But when it goes back to the slow motion boxing, it's super smooth. They were clearly shooting it, whatever, 2 times, 4 times frame rate, and slowing it down, and it looks great. So that stuck out to me. But I think these moments did feel like a lot more Hollywoodized. Even the fact that when Rocky's coming out, they had the lights on so you could see the crowd behind them, because clearly this time they had all the extras they wanted.
Yeah.
So you get that fun stuff. But I think the thing that makes it feel especially Hollywoodized, is this idea that, okay, so he keeps surviving, he keeps getting the shit beat out of him the entire time. The booking of this, to use a wrestling term, is that he's going to be losing the entire time. They're saying that, Apollo's winning almost every round, right? When it starts montaging, that's another round for the champion, another round for Apollo. Rocky's hanging in there, but Apollo's winning all of these on points. And it's like, okay, no, final round, Rocky's going to win by knockout. That's a very Hollywood thing to be like, no, he is losing the entire time and gets a kill shot at, effectively the last possible second. And not even that, it's a kill shot where they both go down and we get the dramatic count out where they're both trying to get to their feet and Apollo falls at the last second, but Rocky stands up. Ta-da! Rocky's done it.
See, I having seen the movie, I agree it couldn't have gone any other way. However, I think that there is the idea with the double knockdown at the end. There is the way that, like, it could have worked where both of them are actually fully knocked down. And it's not decided by points or whatever. It is actually a draw. Like, it's the difference of Apollo won in the last one specifically by points. It was a decision, and Rocky lost at one. But this time around, it actually got even closer.
So you're
where
saying
now they're both evenly matched.
If they plan for them to fight again in 3, you then this is a draw, so that the third movie would be the definitive final fight.
Maybe.
Potentially.
Well, here's the thing. It's because knockout is so much more impressive than winning by decision.
Sure.
So if it ends in a draw, I'd still say Rocky has the upper hand because, like, he won that by knockout. Good on him. He did it. But I think that there is the chance, because obviously people who saw Rocky, there must have been tons of people who were like, oh, okay, this is a Hollywood movie. They go in and then Rocky wins at the end. And then they're surprised when Rocky loses. They would be shocked by that. I think that there is a non-zero subset of this audience who would go into this movie and would not be shocked if Rocky once again didn't win it. If he did just manage to, like, scrape by, get a draw, or even end up losing.
Yeah, but it was far less likely that he wasn't going to win the second. Like, the second movie, it almost feels like it exists to give Rocky the win at the end, which is why it's almost a shame that I don't feel like he earns it thematically as much this time. You don't feel like you're driving for it or striving for it in quite the same way. But I mean, like, obviously the fight looks good. It's well captured. The core tactic being that he's wearing the champ down by just taking punch after punch to the head. It's like, no, he'll tire himself out. We're going to let him tire himself out until he just can't defend himself when I unload at him at the end.
Listen, I understand the strategy. I get it. But I swear to God, if this is going to be a recurring thing over the next God knows how many Rocky movies, where Rocky just refuses to put his gloves in front of his face. Do you understand how much hardship could be saved if Rocky just raised his gloves up in front of his face?
Dear. But yeah. Anyway, Rocky.
Like, I'm not wrong, right?
Can I just... I want to say something else here, right? Yeah. This is not a critique in the movie per se, but I just want to say that this World Championship belt is the ugliest championship belt I have ever seen.
I didn't even really look at
history.
it. Let me see it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's not that good. It looks like it's like, is that like pasta on the side? Like, what kind of ribbon is that?
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's got like a leather belt. It looks like it's got like, it's like someone took down like one of the decorations at July 4th and just put the metal plates on it.
It looks like he's the prize pig at the state fair. Like, it's a ribbon.
And while I don't really know what boxing championships usually look like, but I have watched wrestling in my time, so I do have an idea in my head of what a good title belt looks like. And this ain't it, Chief.
I mean, maybe it was identical for what was at the time, because obviously boxing was not as big of a sport until Rocky, like, made it cool. But yeah. Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe this was seen as prestigious at the time, but this looked like shit to me. But hey, it is what it is. So yeah, I mean, the movie ends with Rocky thanking everyone at the end, specifically leaving Adrian till last. And it freeze frames once again.
I love the fact that he specifically says, like, I just want to say that except for the birth of my child, this is the greatest moment of my life. And I'm like, good job, Rocky. You remembered the child. However, we then immediately cut to Adrian, and I'm like, oh, right, your wedding. Forgot about that one.
Yeah, but he rushed through that, you see, you know?
Yeah. It wasn't actually that big of a deal they got married.
Technically, the day that his child was born was the day that he thought his wife might die because she went into a coma. That was actually a very stressful, dramatic, tragic day in a lot of ways.
Yeah, true. but it was a good moment.
He didn't even see the kid though for like another couple of weeks. So I would argue that definitively, as far as like parents who say that their kid's birth is the best day of their life goes, Rocky has one of the worst examples of that.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe he just considers the birth of his, because they did say the kid was a month premature. Maybe they just like fake it and pretend that he was born the day he was brought into the hospital room.
It was too early. Yeah, we're not counting that.
Yeah, he's like, my wife came back from a coma and I met my son for the first time.
His son came early, just like his dad.
Greatest moment of my life. Wow.
That took you a second to process what I just said.
I was finishing a sentence and I was like, all right, well, now I just got to lead into that.
Hey. You can get pregnant whether you finish early, finish late, creamy middle.
Remember, kids, always wear condominiums.
Or condiments, still work too.
Yep.
Get some ketchup on there.
Also, I especially love the thing at the very end. The very final line is like, I just want to say something to my wife. And I'm like, oh, we're going to do the I love you, but like backwards now. And he's just like, Adrian, I did it. I'm like, that's not I love you.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know if they set up enough. You know, like I don't know if him proclaiming I did it to Adrian feels like it was dramatically like built up to, right? You know, I don't feel like they really sold this idea that, you know, if he'd had a scene earlier on where he's like doubting if he can do it or whatever, and she gives him a pep talk or something, like that would maybe explain why this line makes more sense here at the end. Instead, it just kind of feels like a generic thing that they can end the movie on and then freeze frame and go to credits, rather than it actually really meaning something. Whereas at the end of Rocky 1, it did mean something. The whole point was he cares more about Adrian than winning the fight, right? It was, so it meant something, that those final moments. Here, it's a bit more just cause it's the obvious generic thing to do, as opposed to this dramatically is the perfect closing point of this story. But they had to do something because she's at home with a kid and Polly. She's not there to hug, so they have to do it slightly differently.
They got to show him driving back from the place, stopping at the hospital, getting his head checked, then going back to the apartment and saying, hey, Adrian, I love you.
Oh, dear. Yeah, Rocky 2 is in this weird place, like I said, because it's this transitionary film where it's still trying to be kind of a serious drama like the first one. It's trying to not betray anything it did. But at the same time, it falls short of actually having the good writing to the same level. And I'm not saying Stallone did a bad job writing. I think inherently doing a sequel to a movie like Rocky, there's just so much that's hard to follow up on and make it feel as important feeling, as relevant, as focused as a story. Inherently, it's like, okay, yeah, a lot of the little decisions to like take Rocky forward. Okay, how does he deal with the fame? How does he deal with the money? How does he deal with being a father? And none of those things really betray Rocky as a character. They all feel like they're kind of natural in how they follow on. But because it's, instead of being like a focused story that's got a clear end goal of like, this is what the movie's about, you instead start from this position of, okay, this is what we did before. What's the things we can do with this character going forward? But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's all going to wrap into this is the point of this movie. This is the story of this movie. And that's what it's kind of lacking in a way. And I think the sequels that come after get away with it because it's like, no, we're just going to do a fun movie where there's a villain that he has to fight and we'll just have fun doing that. We don't have to take it as seriously as before. And it's probably for the better. It's why I think 3 and 4 are better sequels, even though they're much sillier movies than Rocky.
Right. I think you really summed it up pretty well very early on there. And the biggest problem what this movie has is that it had to end in a fight.
Yes.
Like, I think that there is a great story that could be told here that would mirror the same sort of drama that the first Rocky film was, of, like you said, exploring the ideas of being a father, being a husband, providing for your family, getting like a job after fame, having that fortune run out. All of these interesting things that could be explored. But ultimately, we had to build up to a fight. And it doesn't feel like it was ever really justified. It feels like it was always kind of something that was forced in because it had to happen rather than it made sense to happen.
Yeah. And obviously, there's a moment where Creed gives him the belt over at the end, and Rocky does thank Creed. When he's thanking people, he says, "Oh, thanks to Apollo Creed for fighting me."
Yeah.
It would have been almost nice to like have a, and maybe this is something they do in 3. I'm not sure, but maybe they sort of retroactively do it in 3. But I would have liked a little moment here again. And maybe this is just because they're not focusing on him because he is a supporting character technically still. But I would have liked a moment with Creed where he kind of is like, you know what, I did this to myself. Like, you know, I had to,
Okay.
or maybe not even I did this to myself, but more just him kind of accepting the outcome in a way that feels like he's learned something from the fight, you know?
You want the ending of Karate Kid. You want the ending of the kid coming over that he just beat in a match saying, like, you earned this. You did it. Congrats.
Maybe not quite as cheesy as that, but it's just the idea that he's maybe learned something about himself, about how the reason why it bothered him so much is because deep down he knew Rocky could beat him. And he's put himself in this position, he's learned that, so maybe he's matured for it because it's like, okay, we know now I can, you know, accept this in some level, or I can start to grow and think about what this means for me now. Or what, you know, I don't know. Just something of a moment of reflection for Creed would have been nice. Whatever it was.
Yeah. Again, I think it's the issue of they were in the last 3 minutes of the movie. It would just narratively take away from Rocky's moment to cut over to Creed and show him having a coming to Jesus moment.
Luckily, we get Apollo back in the next movie in a very different type of role, which is nice because we get to explore that relationship from a very different perspective. So,
okay,
I'm looking forward to that. So,
yeah, same.
Yeah, but next movie we get Clubber Lang. So,
all right,
we get Mr. T. We also get Hulk Hogan of all things.
I pity the fool who has to go up against Clubber Lang.
Well, Rocky is that fool.
And I pity him.
So one thing that I did this on streams yesterday with Tim. I'm trying to add a couple of more segmenty things. So this makes sense to do it before the rating, because it'll maybe even help you think through the rating. But I want to ask you a couple questions. I'll answer them as well. Okay. I want you to pick the scene of the movie. The best scene, and explain why it's your favorite scene of the movie.
Oh, God. See, I just closed out the window of the movie, so now I'm just having to do this by memory. I've
done the whole thing by memory. It's fine.
Yeah, you got some stuff out of order, though. I had to correct you.
I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's not supposed to be a blow by blow account.
I got you. Best scene of the movie for me. I think I would say best scene of the movie for me would be the first, not the first, but that stairwell conversation with Mickey.
Okay, yeah.
I think Mickey basically just laying down the law saying, like, I want you to fight. I want this to be a thing, but you just can't do it anymore. And having him physically show that Rocky is incapable of doing it. And then ending the scene with the outreach, basically saying, like, yeah, I'll give you a job at the gym. Like, we'll let you work there if you really, really need it that badly. Because it is also Rocky at basically his lowest point, where he doesn't feel like he can provide for his family either. So I think everything combined, that's probably my favorite scene.
Yeah, I think for me it's the press conference. I think it works on multiple levels. And for the record, the scene of the movie can be for any reason. It can be for story reasons, it can be for cinematography, it can, whatever the reason might be. It's completely open to why you like it. But I think for me, this scene, it works on several levels. One is the fact that Creed is getting angry because Rocky's not in the same serious position he's in, which is a great reversal from the last movie. But I think it also works as a great counterpoint to earlier in the film, where Rocky was humiliated trying to do those commercials and like couldn't speak confidently, couldn't work. And it just showed that him being himself was so much better. Like him just getting to be himself and feeling confident on a microphone versus earlier on in the film when he was put in this position to try and not be himself, just showed how much how much of a good presence he is, how much of a positive atmosphere he brings to anything, which isn't necessarily the right thing for a fight, and that's why Creed's getting pissed off. Well, part of the reason why Creed's getting pissed off. But I think that just juxtaposition between the two of them, and also between Rocky and that earlier scene when he's trying to like present something in a different manner, I think just does a lot for both characters and for how they're different from each other and where they're both at going into this next fight. It was one of the more confident scenes of the whole movie to me. It almost feels like this movie had a lot of great specific scene ideas. It's just that bringing them all together wasn't quite as good as the first movie could do it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Stallone wrote the first Rocky, so the script was already there, but I do wonder how much of this is him being a new director and having to make that as well.
I think it is interesting that he did write the script, though, for the first one, because it shows that he knew how to structure, he knew how to, get the characters to the right point. So it showed he did have some understanding of that, at the very least, before he did this movie. So that's interesting. The other question I want you to ask is, I want you to pick And I was debating as to whether or how to phrase this. Like, am I asking you to pick the best performance of the movie or the best character of the movie? And
Okay.
I think what I said to Tim is you can interpret it however you want. If you want to point out a performance because it's just a good performance, if you want to point out if it's your favorite character for whatever reason, but pick an MVP, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
All right, MVP of the movie, I'm going to give it to... I think I'm going to go ahead with Apollo for this movie. I think as much as Rocky is still Rocky in pretty much every way, there was like, a little bit of transition getting him a bit more Stallone-ified. I think that this movie did a fantastic job of taking Apollo's character and moving it into a more serious place through, I think, the most believable means of just 100% rolling right into, people are saying this. I've always been concerned about my image, and now it's something that is getting to him. Of course, I would cut the one wheelchair scene, but beyond that, I think that Apollo's character in this is probably given a bit more depth than even Rocky's character is. I think he's given a lot more drive and determination. And as we said throughout the whole thing, he has a reason to want to fight. He has a reason to show up there at the end. So I'll give that character award to Apollo, played by Carl Weathers.
Yes. And I think obviously Carol Weathers being great is a big part of like why Apollo Creed is so good. I actually think I'm going to agree and say Apollo Creed. I think it left me wanting more of him. It left me wishing he had more scenes, the fleshing out what he gets even more. But because he does have the very different like direction in this movie, because he's coming at it from a very different angle of now being the one who wants to prove himself, even though he's been at the top, to prove that he's not washed up, to prove that he is still the best. It's just a little bit more interesting, I think, overall. And part of it might be because you don't have to spend as much time with him. I think Rocky maybe even almost suffers a little bit from spending so much time with them that all the different things they try to add to the character don't necessarily all fit together perfectly. So yeah, I would pick Apollo Creed as well. All right. Well, which leads us to rating the movie out of 10.
Yes. So Rocky, I was very positive on. I gave that a 9 out of 10. I think that there's a reason it's regarded as a classic. Obviously, for everything we've just said for the past hour and 40 minutes, I think this one is not quite up to that standard. It is still a fine movie. I just think that there is something missing to it. And there's a bit of a disconnect between what I was hoping the movie would be, what it feels like it starts out as, and what we end up with by the end. So between all of that, I'm going to go ahead and just give this one a flat 7. I think that it's still in the positive realm. It's still good. It's just not quite up to any sort of great standard by any measure.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of wrestling with a 7 or a 6.5 myself. I think 6.5 almost feels a little bit harsh, which is why, because I still think it's good. It's definitely a flawed good, but it is good. There's still things to like in here. There's still overall themes and ideas that are solid, characters that I really enjoy watching. I definitely, though, does feel a bit slow at times because it goes back to this sort of more drama, and it's more, I think you feel it a bit more in this one versus the first movie. Because you're coming back down from that high of the fight, which they even show again at the start of the movie, so it's like it's fresh as it could be. Which is why I'm tempted to bump it down and say that it's in that almost good kind of level as opposed to just being flat good. But I do feel like I'm being a bit harsh if I say that. So despite all my faults, I think I am still just going to give it the 7. But it's like it's just hitting that and no more, I think, for me. So there you go.
And then obviously the segment that is specific to this show, does it make the cut?
This is actually, what did we get the first one? Remind me.
We said makes the cut. I was saying I could be convinced to be a cut above, but we ultimately said, it's just, it's a good one, but it makes the cut.
Yeah, I think we said it's the upper tier makes the cut. I think from that logic, I think this is an upper tier cutting it close.
I'll agree. My main concern is if we say makes the cut for this one, and 3 and 4 end up being as good as you make them out to be for me, then I'm going to regret saying makes the cut. I
mean, good is subjective, I think, with 3 and 4. I think, I'm not saying they're great movies. I just think they're fun movies, yes.
Yeah. So I'll agree with an upper tier cutting it close, but it is still a solid movie throughout.
Yeah. Now, admittedly, the ratings of those next two will be interesting because they might not end up rating them higher than this one from like an objective kind of quality kind of perspective, but it just kind of depends. I've not seen them in a while though. I don't know how I'm going to feel, but you know, I feel like we're going to get pumped. We're going to be like Here and I the Tiger or the song from 4, which the name I can't remember. I know when I hear it though.
I mean, I'm just looking forward to half of Ivan Drago's lines because I've always heard them repeated, but I've never heard the man himself say it.
If he dies, he dies.
Perfect.
Yeah. So there you go. Right. That is Rocky 2, everyone. Next week, obviously, it's time for Rocky 3. There's not a whole lot of complex things to say there. But, yeah, obviously, check out the Atomic Cinema Experiment, which is the other show we do together, talking about science fiction films. We have just done some interesting stuff. We just had episode 250 of that show. We did the Twilight Zone movie, and this very week we did Alien Romulus. We did Covenant weeks ago. We had the new Alien movie this week, which is actually way more exciting. So yeah, go check out that. But you can support the show over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonuses for your trouble. We do 2 extra shows every month on there. We do a monthly show called Criterion Cut, where we do movies from the Criterion Collection. So just like this show, but with fancy art house movies and foreign films and classics. Most of the time, anyway. Sometimes Criterion will let the odd little weird one in. Maybe occasionally we'll do one of those. But yeah. So you can check out that. We also do extra reels every month where we do some of the worst things ever made. It's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. So bad they're good. Hopefully, that doesn't always work out, but that's the intent anyway when we started that show. So if that sounds like fun, then by all means you can go and check out the bonus shows. But,
and without spoiling anything, you definitely want to be subscribed for this month's extra reels.
Oh,
it's
gonna
be a big one.
It's a big one. It's a recent movie, which I think this is going to be the first extra reels movie that I watch in 4K. I don't think any of the other ones were available in such a format.
Are you going to shell out the money to get the 4K?
Well, not a disc. Just renting the.
Is it streaming? Okay.
Yeah,
I thought I was going to have to go into some seedy sides.
No. You can rent.
All right. That's good.
It's available. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us, everyone. That pretty much wraps up the show. This has been the Collector's Cut for Rocky 2. We'll see you next week for Rocky 3. So, yo, South African guy from Lethal Weapon 2 with Diplomatic Immunity. We did it!